Blessings and Maledictions. Archmagos Damaya Voratrix set down her stylus. She glanced across at the servitor scribe, a wizened old man whose life had been stretched far beyond its natural span. She had known him for over a century. Once, long ago, he had been the book carrier of technoarchaeologist Magos Remek Tzaran, her old mentor. She had kept him on after Tzaran's death, a fitting continuity, and the old servitor had performed just as well for the apprentice as he once had for the master. Now she was the master, though she had no apprentice herself, none she deemed worthy. Perhaps Tiberius? Adequate, yes, and generous of spirit, but were they not all in the end? Tiberius was a commander, a tool, no different than this stylus she had just returned to its holder. She had come a long way. Her exile had ended in greatness, and now she had, in a sense, birthed her own chapter of Astartes. Voratrix had dedicated herself entirely to the spiritual and technical aspects of the coming war, eschewing politics and command in favor of her unmatched understanding of the machine spirit's mysteries. Diplomatic and strategic decisions she left to others more suited to them. Seeing Beornwulf grow into the role she had chosen for him, since that first moment she had lifted the boy's chin in her clawed grip, gave her some measure of satisfaction, though his independent thinking sometimes irritated her. Tactical oversight within the Mechanicum she delegated to Magos Doctora Cogitatus Tiberius, whose methodical, calculated approach ensured their forces were deployed with mechanical precision. And so Voratrix turned all her considerable intellect and fervor toward the machine spirits, fortifying their resolve with intricate rites of consecration. She anointed war machines, vehicles, and cogitators with sacred oils and canticles, embedding recursive sanctity algorithms that went far beyond traditional blessings. These deep sanctifications heightened performance while rendering them resistant to enemy interference, a vital advantage against the scrap code tactics of their foes. The Battle of the Secutor Reliquary, as reported by Osric, had caught her by surprise and concern. She had believed Chaos influence in the Reach to be minor, overshadowed by far greater Xenos threats. But the devastating deployment of scrap code had changed her assessment. She had no idea what she had truly been dealing with until now. While their common cause with these allies persisted, she knew that sooner or later they would have to be addressed. Archmagos Pyrovox had only just departed, after delivering a fragmentary spark of dark Mechanicum scrap code, a remnant of what had nearly destroyed his forge world. She had spent hours ripping it apart, line by line, only to find it screaming back. A shiver rattled her brass-spined frame. That code had been alive. No, not merely almost alive, but alive. The Dark Mechanicum, in their arrogance, had not realized what they had forged into a weapon. Very well, she mused. Two could play at maledictions upon the machine spirit. No sense letting errant code go to waste, not if it could be redirected to the Omnissiah's service. She set about devising a fusion of offensive and counteroffensive cyber warfare programs, works of art as much as weapons of war. These maledictions were designed not merely to defend, but to turn the enemy's own greatest strength, their scrap code, against them. Scrap code, a virulent corruption of machine logic, had long been a potent tool for sowing chaos within the Mechanicum's ranks, but Voratrix would tame it, harness it, and bend it to her will. Magos Doctora Cogitatus Tiberius entered the chamber. Voratrix did not greet him verbally, but transmitted a burst of binaric cant. In that single burst, their conversation spanned what would have taken an hour in spoken words. She absorbed every update on the new defensive works and the ongoing additions to Beornwulf's newly forged chapter. She chose to omit any comment on the ominous smell of wet dog that now permeated the chamber, the scent of Tiberius's wargs. She regarded him as he examined the glowing cages of data code that displayed her latest creations. "How are your wargs?" she asked, partly to make conversation, but also to ease into a question. She had learned over many years that people like to be asked after their work. "Wirkung and Demung are well and efficient," Tiberius replied, glancing back with a brief smile. Thenkung, however, lost a paw in the Drukhari incursion. She now has an augmentic replacement that is 34% more efficient, but I suppose you didn't truly wish to know about that. Voratrix inclined her head minutely. I was going to ask about the effectiveness of adding wargs to the chapter's manifest. Tiberius returned his attention to the data cages, methodically studying each one. "It is not your decision, of course," he said. "But yes, wargs can be an effective addition as combat beasts. The greatest obstacles are training and provisioning. They require ample space and large quantities of food. However, Bjornwolf has made a point of incorporating the Wudawara into the Void Revenants, so most of that will be managed by them. And a starship's ducting is not unlike a forest in its way. There are miles of such passages beneath the outer hull." He picked up a parchment, scanning the babble of runic script as he continued. "You know," he went on, "Bjornwolf has a remarkable ability to maneuver things into place rather than giving direct orders." He glanced at Voratrix through the reflection in the chamber's observation window, beyond which Nitwortha gently turned below the vast starforge. Not unlike his mother, Voratrix watched him directly, not through the glass. "Not by design," she admitted. Tiberius moved closer to the row of glowing data cages, their softly pulsing hex codes scrawling across brass-framed lumens. He scanned the designations etched in binaric glyphs, one clawfinger tracing each name. "The pulse of dissolution," he read aloud. "What does this one do?" Voratrix's voice, calm and clinical, answered as she observed the cage scrap code's frantic writhing. "A virulent infection, designed to force enemy cogitators into executing hundreds of contradictory commands. Processor overload, then failure, then self-destruction. 1,000-fold enemy errors turned inward, until their machine logic devours itself." Tiberius nodded, impressed, then shifted his gaze to the next lumen cage. "The blinding circuit. A snare," she explained, almost with satisfaction. "It lays dormant until intruding code or hostile machine spirits touch it. Then it detonates a cascading overload signal into their targeting subroutines. Sightless, they fire wildly, or not at all." He gave a soft chuckle at the elegance of it. His finger moved down to the next sigil. "The Howling Null." "That," Voratrix replied, "is a projected nullification field. It corrodes data streams, leaving enemy vox and comms in perpetual static. Banshee-like howls, corrupted distress signals, the screams of their dying layered in. It breaks morale as much as it breaks their signal integrity." Tiberius arched an eyebrow, genuinely admiring the psychological touch. Then he paused at a far more elaborate High Gothic inscription. "Navis umbra phasma apparitionum," he recited carefully. Voratrix allowed a thin smile to pass across her pallid lips. "Yes, commonly named Gastsip, a hollow emitter mine, seeded with scrap code to simulate a warship, engine signatures, life sign patterns, transponder codes, even simulated damage effects. Their sensors will see it, believe it, and fire upon it, and even experience artificial decompression or thruster misfires themselves, triggered by the scrap code infecting their hull cogitators." Tiberius exhaled a long, thin note of binaric approval. "Your maledictions grow ever more imaginative." Voratrix inclined her head only slightly, basking in the acknowledgement. "The Omnissiah expects artistry," she replied. Tiberius studied the swirling, bound scrap code behind the lumens, his features tightening. "Voratrix," he said slowly, "these constructs, they tread dangerously close to forbidden ground. True machine thought, recursive intention, self-propagation, these are perilous tools. You know the strictures against autonomous code, let alone code drawn from the dark Mechanicus." Voratrix's eyes glinted like polished iron. "The basis," she replied, "is taken from the corrupted scrap code recovered above Incaloris. The enemy's weapon turned back upon itself, reforged to our pattern. Nothing more." Tiberius gave a dry, humorless laugh. "You always were adept at breaking the strictures, Voratrix, and even more adept at covering your path. Enough code branches laid over the trail that any investigator would die of old age before they reached the truth." He folded his arms, studying the caged code that still twisted and rippled like a living thing. "If you had ever turned fully to heresy," he mused, "you would have been a formidable foe indeed." Voratrix actually laughed, a sharp, metallic echo of mirth. "My dear Tiberius," she replied, "you would have followed me years ago without even realizing it." He dipped his head, acknowledging the truth in that, then returned his gaze to the flickering data cages, both of them content, for now, to stand in their own gray space between orthodoxy and innovation. A horn blared through the station's vox throats, echoing with a pompous, drawn-out blast of wind instruments. Voratrix rolled her eyes. Of course. Wolfgar had insisted that all station systems announce the arrival of the chapter master with what he called a triumphant clarion. Voratrix called it an annoying windwork. Tiberius pressed his fingers to his brass-clad temples. Apologies. I've disengaged all the horns from the planetary Vox network, but I forgot about the station feed. The door opened, and Bornwolf strode in, shaking his head, his heavy armor plates clattering softly. Emperor, help me. If I ever have to sneak through one of my own realms, that sound will be the death of me. Behind him stepped Deacon Absalon, dignified in his newly restored robes. Yes, Absalon admitted with a small smile. I can see the disadvantage, but Wolfgar meant it in honest respect. Tiberius inclined his head, giving the ecclesiarch a respectful binaric salute. Voratrix crossed the chamber with a grace at odds with her augmetic frame, taking Absalon's hands gently in both of her own. Perfect flesh hands, sculpted so artfully that if one did not know better, they would swear they were natural. Absalon, she greeted, with something close to warmth, so very pleased to see you. Bornwolf paused as he noticed the rows of data cages, each glowing with twisting, serpentine coils of living code that reflected onto his face. He leaned closer, studying their hypnotic movements, the light dancing across the polished plates of his jaw. Been making magic wards again, Modor? He asked, a faint grin breaking through his war-weary features. Tiberius stepped forward sharply, a delicate mechadendrite unfurling from his shoulder to gently push Bornwolf back from the cages. You have been spending time with Cuthelm again, haven't you? Tiberius scolded mildly. Bjornwolf laughed, straightening up. He has interesting ways of explaining things, that's all. Voratrix inclined her head, a trace of indulgence in her tone. These are no mere wards, Bornwolf. They are maledictions, designed to turn the enemy's own heresies back against them. Bjornwolf nodded, still fascinated by the writhing strands of code. Whatever you name them, so long as they break the foe, I will call them blessings. Bornwolf straightened, eyes still on the caged code wards. I will be happy to put these to use in the coming battle, he said, with that matter-of-fact certainty that seemed to silence even the most pessimistic war councils. Absalon stepped forward, folding his hands into the sleeves of his robe. Which is why we came, my lady, he continued, voice edged with concern. I heard there are a number of five-tower cult priests in custody aboard this station. Voratrix made a sour face, mechanical eyes narrowing. Odious things. I handed them over to Tiberius, told him to flush them out an airlock or put them on the next freighter home. I cannot quite recall which. Tiberius cleared his throat politely. Actually, my security services still have them in holding. The Arbites transferred them to station custody. They were attempting to secure transport to the surface. Bornwolf frowned. Is that even a crime? Absalon sighed, showing a faint frustration. The five-tower cult are technically a sanctified branch of the Adeptus Ministorum. By imperial law, I cannot forbid fellow ecclesiarchy to act in their own sphere. However, I am deacon here, and I choose to keep them far from my seat. Bjornwolf folded his arms, curious. Why? Aren't they, well, ecclesiarchy? Absalon's brow furrowed. They practice certain unorthodox methods. They regard Matriarch Bishop Lady Seraphina as a living mouth of the Omnissiah and Emperor in one. Their hierarchy is unusual, Bjornwolf snorted. Ah, one of those. Preachers who try to pull rank, Tiberius interjected, voice clipped. Actually, there are suspected links with the Council, Tiberius spoke, voice low but edged with iron. Chapter Master, your move against the five-tower cult's aligned pirates could be read as interference in a recognized ecclesiarchy group, one tied to Novaterra. That, in turn, might be viewed as siding against the Council. Are you certain you wish to be seen in that light? Bjornwolf folded his arms, pausing only a heartbeat. The Astartes are charged with defending the Imperium, not playing one High Lord's game against another. The Void Revenants will not be seen as weapons of any faction. We do not serve the Council, nor the Novaterrans, nor the broken high thrones of Terra. We serve mankind. Absalon gave a respectful dip of the head, but his voice was hesitant. Still, Bjornwolf, imperial law recognizes the Adeptus Ministorum's independence. The five-tower cult hold proper ordination. Should the Novaterra Synod see your strike as an insult, it could escalate to a censure or worse. Bornwolf's gaze was steady as stone. Let them call it what they wish. If a priest of the Ministorum turns pirate, then they break the Emperor's law. No one is above that, no matter what banner they wear. Voratrix spoke at last, her voice smooth and cold. Beornwulf is correct, in principle. The Omnissiah's will is not subject to these petty schisms. However, she looked directly at him, I would caution you. From a legal standpoint, there are High Lords of Terra still living, however fractured their council may be. Technically, I am bound to support them, not the Council of Nova Terra, nor any separatist conclave. Tiberius adjusted one of his mechadendrites, clicking softly. Then you will stand with Terra if forced to choose? Voratrix inclined her head a fraction. If forced, yes. The machine cult's treaties are with the Lords of Terra, not their upstart rivals. Beornwulf nodded, accepting the point with a soldier's resignation. That is your place, and my place is here. We are the Emperor's angels of death, not some politician's enforcers. We go where the Imperium needs us. Tiberius's lenses flared slightly. Then why pursue these five-tower cult vessels at all, if you wish to stay neutral? Beornwulf's tone was ironclad. Because I do not care what flag you fly, or whose heretical council you bow to. Pirates are criminals, traitors are criminals, and no one is above the law. For a moment there was silence. Then Voratrix nodded once, sharply. Spoken like a true son of the Emperor. Beornwulf turned his gaze to Absalon, tone measured. Deacon, as the ranking representative of the Ministorum here, what is the legal standing of the Five-Tower cult if they wish to establish a mission on Nitwirtha itself? Absalon drew in a breath, shoulders tightening. I would not allow it, not on the island. Their doctrine is too unstable. It would sow division among the faithful. A smile crept across Beornwulf's face, cold and deliberate. I never said the island. The chamber fell abruptly silent. Voratrix paused mid-calculation. Tiberius looked genuinely puzzled, and Absalon's eyes narrowed in slow comprehension. Not all the Acersips are crewed by Nitwirthans, Absalon finally said, realization dawning. Beornwulf laughed, an easy, honest laugh. Actually, I was thinking of the deep-sea colonies, but since you mentioned the Acersips, Absalon spoke carefully, seeking clarity. You mean to permit their presence on Nitwirtha, but only on a select few of the orbiting agricultural stations? Beornwulf nodded, pleased. Exactly. That way, we broker a deal with Manifold Dawn and keep the cult under observation without compromising the island's doctrine. Voratrix allowed herself a thin smile, approval in her mechanical eyes. A clever move. You ingratiate the Void Revenants with both the Adeptus Ministorum of Terra and the Ecclesiarchy of Nova Terra. Tiberius frowned, clearly unsettled. A dangerous game, Chapter Master. Playing both sides could get you burned. Beornwulf's face was calm, even honest. On the contrary, it gives all of you deniability, and it preserves a measure of peace between factions, at least here in our corner of the Imperium. Absalon folded his hands in his sleeves, voice quiet but honest. And how long do you think such peace will last? Beornwulf let out a long breath. As long as we can hold it, he replied. That will have to do. Beornwulf exhaled through his nose, jaw tensing. Needless to say, may we have a word with your prisoners? Voratrix nodded crisply. Of course, I will see that the Maledictions are transferred to Osric for immediate integration. Beornwulf clapped her lightly on the shoulder guard with a soldier's thanks. Appreciated, Modor. Absalon gave her a formal bow. May the Omnissiah keep you, he offered, then turned to follow Beornwulf and Tiberius out of the chamber. Voratrix watched them leave, already reaching for her stylus again, her mind turning to the next layer of code. After the others had departed, silence reclaimed the chamber. Voratrix leaned over her workbench, lines of fresh code dancing along the lumens as her mechadendrites traced new logic patterns with inhuman precision. She paused, letting her gaze unfocus for a moment, thoughts turning inward. She had always prided herself on being a weaver of plans. She had done so much, ending the long and illustrious career of her own mentor, striking deals with a never-born to bribe a Magos Genitor, arranging pacts with traitors, even sabotaging a Thunderhawk to silence a nosy sister of battle. All these schemes, calculated with cold precision to build an Astartes chapter in the Reach, a chapter meant to keep the wider Imperium's eye turned away from this place. Yet now, watching Beornwulf in full sail, Seeing how easily he navigated the games of brinkmanship, she found herself troubled. He was capable of moves she had not foreseen, a true son of the frontier, and perhaps the first piece she had ever placed on the board that refused to obey her hand. She shivered, a faint twitch of brass along her spine. What had she just unleashed upon the Reach? Voratrix returned to her code, forcing her mind back to sacred logic. The old servitor, silent and patient, approached to collect the data cages for transfer to Osric. She allowed herself a small, wry smile. I have a terrible feeling, she thought, that Bjornwolf is going to make my existence far more interesting than I ever intended.